right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Face the Truth. I'm excited about this one. I've known this guy for a few years. We haven't seen each other for a long time, so it'll be kind of fun to catch up a little bit. But we go back in the day, back in the early schoolism days. Awesome artist, really amazing concept artist, and also a super inspiring instructor and teacher, and pretty passionate dude. So this should be fun talking to him. And he's not ignoring me. He's actually painting. Which kind of is ignoring me, but at the same time, it's pretty cool at the same time. So I'm kind of good with
definitely
that.
Ignoring.
We're definitely good to go with it. So, it is what it is. You know, some guys are addicted to crack. He can't stop drawing. So anyways, without further ado, please welcome the one and only Anthony Jones.
Thank you. That was nice. That was a nice intro.
So how's it going, man?
It's going. It's going good. I'm painting as we speak, and I'm just looking around to make sure there's nothing. I thought I saw something. I'm painting as we speak and hanging out with you. I like to try to, especially when I'm doing talks or something like this. It's nice to just kind of be somewhat productive.
That's pretty awesome. No, that's awesome, man. Yeah, man. Like I said, in my my amazingly beautiful intro, you know, we met a long time ago. Gosh, I don't know. Was it like 2000? Like, was it 2010? Sometime around there. Maybe.
It might have been almost a decade, dude. That's crazy.
Yeah, doing schoolism. I think in Toronto. Yeah, lots happened. My end as well. But man, you've always been like this super like driven. Especially with like a passion for sharing and teaching. You can hear my babies up there crying. Sorry about that.
Don't worry, my babies it'll be their turn soon.
But that's one thing I always really admired about you is, you know, when because the first time we met, we were both doing workshops for schoolism, and I think I was doing like a caricature workshop. I think like an exaggeration.
Most likely.
I can't remember if it was that or I think it was. And you were doing I think you were doing like a creature concept thing. But what blew me away, the thing that blew my mind, and I never, you know, I always think about this every time was at that point, I had never seen anybody work digitally the way that you do.
Sure.
It's very strange to watch actually, because for me, I'm still not very tech savvy. And I pretty much just use the paintbrush tool and the erase tool, and I use a few layers. Yeah. But I'm watching you, and you're just all of a sudden the screen's like flipping back and forth, and all these different things are happening, and things are popping up and disappearing. And I remember just being like, "Man, this guy is like part cyborg." Hence the name
robot.
Yeah.
Robot pencil.
Yeah. Robot pencil. So from that on, I was like, "Man, this guy is crazy awesome." But you continue to keep pushing, and I noticed, I think recently you started working with Procreate at all. I think I saw some studies with that as well.
Yeah, I'm in Procreate. I used Infinite Painter. I used the Wacom version Fresco. I use them all, really. It doesn't really
everything basically.
Matter. Yeah. It's just the tool, right? And so
it's interesting seeing you though. Like I can still see the same style and same feeling, but there is something a little bit different, I think, with the iPad. I don't know what it is. I've noticed it with my work as well.
Yeah, I think with the iPad, what it is that it's closer to what we're used to seeing or used to using, right? Especially because like you can rotate the device, and that rotation of the device feels more natural because you're used to doing that with like a notepad or sketchbook. Where like, so for instance, I'm painting digitally as we speak. And so I'm like looking straight ahead, right? And then I have my keyboard down here and I have my Wacom tablet down here. And so like I have like this setup where it's like completely unnatural, right? Where I'm completely standing up. My arms are like just kind of bent at a 90-degree angle. and I'm just looking at a screen, right? That's about 2 feet away from my face. Versus like when you have like a sketchbook, you're just like this, and you're tilting your head, you're tilting the device, you're like, putting your hand in the right position. Like there's a lot to that that's more intuitive. And that intuition, I think, carries over in the tool a little bit better. But, with that said, I still find that like for instance, I paint in Photoshop. I still find that there's a lot more speed there because of the robust amount of tools that I've gotten like really accustomed to. Yeah. Right. So like to me, an iPad is really good for sketching, absolutely, and finished works too. If I just want to sit down and just paint, right? But in terms of speed, I will always be faster. At least for now. I only speak with like the tools that are existing currently on a PC or some sort of machine, right? Because of just the robustness and power of the machine as well as the tools. But at some point, I'm assuming that it's gonna get easier on like an iPad, and something else might come around, you know, and it's just gonna be obviously that is the tool,
Well, I mean, like iPad it's definitely getting better and better. I mean, remember years ago when they were first trying to use those like style, I think the technology was all in the tip of the stylus. It was like that rubber nub thing, and it was the worst to draw, on an iPad. Yeah. It was just terrible. So
there was no technology. It was just
bad.
Literally, it was literally just a rubber thing on the end of a pen, and it was to simulate your finger. But because it's weird to finger paint, but it's better when because again you're used to like holding a thing, and so they just like say, all right, we'll just put a thing on the at the end.
It was messed up, man. Yeah. I was in Germany. I was actually in Austria for a workshop, and then Wacom found out I was in the area, and there was a tech kind of convention happening in Berlin, and that I was there. They knew I was there, and they're like, "Hey, could we fly you to Berlin and test out this new thing in front of an audience that And I'm like, and then they offered to pay me money, and I'm like, sure, yeah, okay, I'll do anything for money. And so I go over there, and it's they gave me an iPad to work on, and they gave me one of the this little pen thing with the rubber nub. And I couldn't draw for shit with that thing. It was the worst thing. And they didn't even have a drawing program at the time. They just had I think it was just like the note program for taking notes or whatever. So it was like this. It was good for like if you want to sign your name or something, but that's basically it. Yeah. And I remember having to do like this drawing in front of all these people on this piece of crap thing. It was crazy. But anyways, it's pretty amazing to see where it's come though in the last few years, with the iPad. I really enjoy sketching and painting on it now. I haven't really done anything final for like a client on it yet. It's mostly just been stuff for myself,
that would be interesting to see you do a final piece on there.
Well, I'm doing a couple right now, but I haven't really. I'm recording them for the Lightbox thing.
Oh, that's right.
I'm trying to do I'm going to try to have some videos available for that if possible. But so when you're working right now, Photoshop, you're not working on a Cintiq. You're working on a tablet still.
Yeah. Let me see if I can.
So that's
share my screen.
Old school.
Audio and video settings. I don't think I can. I think since I initially started, I can't. That was great though.
Yeah.
I just have a laptop, and I use a widescreen monitor. It's like a curved one, and that's it. Like my laptop's my main machine too. I don't really have anything else.
It's been so long since I've used a tablet for painting that that does feel very disconnected.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I've been spoiled for like the last 10 or so years working on a Cintiq. I guess it's funny because for years I didn't use a Cintiq. I just had a tablet, and it was fine. And then I think someone kept you got to get a Cintiq. You got to get if you're going to be professional, you have to work on a Cintiq. So I can't remember who was telling me that, but like I kept hearing about it, and then but it was like $3,000 or $4,000 at first, whatever it was. It was crazy.
Yeah, it's still pretty expensive. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember I remember making a decision that, hey, I'm gonna just start taking a certain percentage out of every one of my checks that I get until I can get it.
Right.
and then I finally ended up getting a Cintiq, and then that was it.
That's clever.
That was a game changer. But like, I remember the days on the tablet, and it was kind of strange. I found it hard to sketch on the tablet. It was much easier to paint for me, but the drawing part was a little bit weird because it just felt like you said, you're not really you're disconnected between your eye and your hand and the the images. And
so to kind of get into this, so like the rationale behind the tablet that I use now, because I have used the Cintiq before, and I think a Cintiq is an incredibly powerful tool, and I think most artists prefer it. But what I found is that because like I'm always hunched over when I'm drawing with like a Cintiq or on my iPad, I'll start getting like neck pains, back pains, and then like I didn't really care at first. I was just like, whatever, I got to get work done. And then I was working at Sony at the time, and the Cintiq that I had broke for whatever reason, just broke. And I was like, oh crap! So I got to work though, and so they brought me a tablet and a monitor, right? So they set me up with a tablet monitor, and they're like, is that okay? And I was like, yeah, of course. I've actually painted with a tablet monitor for years before I was using a Cintiq. And then what ended up happening was once I like started doing it, like I like straightened out my back. I was just kind of like, my arms a little bit better positioned. And then all of a sudden I started feeling less pain. And then I just felt also just a little bit more free. It was weird.
That's interesting.
So I started kind of like analyzing why this was happening. And I discovered, I think the reason why was that, so you know this, right? And many of the people who are watching probably have some clue of this. And if you don't, this is like a thing that you should do as an artist, which is like step away from your painting, right?
Yeah.
Where if you're really up close, like we're like up there, you're only like focused on like an eye. But then you pull back after spending an hour rendering an eye, you'll notice that the eye might be misproportionate. Maybe it's overly detailed, so the rest of the painting looks kind of flawed. Or maybe it's misshapen, or maybe it's in the wrong position. Maybe the values don't match up with the rest of the painting. Like, there's so many things that can go wrong. And it could be all those things. It could be a collection of everything that I just mentioned. So pulling out, like basically stepping away from your painting, or zooming out in my case, allows you to see the whole image. And every time you make a mark, you always see in the context of the larger image, right? And so when I had a Cintiq, I was kind of like naturally and like indirectly just doing that, like kind of getting closer, like not on purpose, just like I was just doing it. But then when I had my monitor, it was like forcibly like away from me, right? And then I had like a smaller tablet, like I'll show you my tablet. Like I have a smaller, like it's not that big.
Right? Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because that's what they gave me. They gave me like a small tablet. Because it's like, well, what do we got left? Like we got to get this artist to work. So I had like a smaller space to paint with. That it kind of put me in a mode of always thinking in the macro shapes. That allowed my paintings to get done faster and a lot more clear. And that was also an accident, but that feeling of like, wow, why do I feel more free? Like I feel like I'm like pushing through this way easier. That's when I discovered there's like all these different things were going on, and I was like, okay. And so then I like forcibly make sure that I can see my whole image at all times, like because we have like a very small scope of like it's actually smaller than this. I forget exactly what it is. A focus that you have in your peripheral view, like it's mostly blurred except for that one part of focus. And so my image is like always in focus while everything else is in peripheral view. Does that make sense? And I just gotten so used to doing that then, and just kind of training under that lens that I got really, really good with painting with the tablet and monitor, and I actually prefer it. So on the iPad or on the Cintiq, because I've done demos on Cintiqs, and I've done demos on my iPad, recently. And I remember when I did one at an event that I think it was last year. It might have been at GDC, which is a conference for game developers. I was given like the biggest Cintiq. It was like the 27-inch or whatever. It was like the massive. It was like huge, right? And so I just showed you, like I work on a small space and I like to stay zoomed out, right? And so this thing is like in your face, like it's pretty much a table. And so as I was doing my demo, it's hard to demonstrate this. So I'll try to demonstrate this using.
You were basically using one small spot.
Yeah,
on the whole
it was like this little like pixel perfect. Like you'd have to get close to see because they had it like on a.
They were
big
probably
screen.
like, "What the heck is this guy doing?"
Yeah, it was like on a big screen. But
that's hilarious.
If you were to actually have the scale of how big my image was on like this like 60-inch screen, it was probably like a 3 by 5 inch image. So I realized that was happening. So then I was like, oh man, I have to kind of like break my good habits to kind of make a better presentation, right?
Well, it's interesting what you were saying about the zooming out thing. I find this interesting because I know this about you. I'm pretty sure we've talked about this before, but you were never really a traditional artist. You started digitally, right? Yeah. And so you were just this thing that you discovered by working on this small thing. This is how, like, artists that like me that started traditionally and worked traditionally, this is how we already think.
Yeah.
So you basically kind of figured that out because, like, for example, one of the things I teach my students all the time is, hey, listen, this, like what you said, like you did an amazing job rendering out this eye, but it doesn't work with the rest of the image. Like, what's going on here? And, ideally what you want to do when you're working on a piece is to work on the whole thing at once. Like, let's step back, look at it, how it's developing at once. And so that's a really good advice because, before you get into starting to block in, starting to detail, getting into there's like steps into this thing, like people want to jump into color right away or whatever it is, but you got to have that drawing, the foundation. So I think it's definitely a really good way to, it's interesting how you came to that by working on the tablet that way. That's a pretty interesting analogy of it. But I mean, I work on a 27-inch Cintiq for most of my professional stuff. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I like about it is that I can kind of step back when I sketch sometimes and use the whole thing to like draw. But I have a way where I would say like when I'm working on an illustration, man, I would say like the first few hours or so at least, I'd never zoom in. It's all done at a small size.
Yeah,
like
that's what you should be doing.
How you're working on if you were working on an oil painting, you can't zoom in on the painting or anything. You gotta,
you gotta step back.
You gotta block the whole thing. So that's pretty awesome that you work that way. That's cool.
Like, to your point of this traditional sensibilities. So I talk to my students in the same regard, and a lot of them come from a digital background, right? Because they're wanting to be concept artists, and most concept artists these days, if not all of them, do everything digitally. Oh wait, hold on, my daughter came in. Yes, sir.
Because doing things online, did you make these coins or this flower?
No, Suda, I'm in the middle of an interview. What are you doing?
It's all right.
So I've been doing these. I draw these color books for them so that they can color.
Oh, that's cool.
And so I have a do not disturb sign too. I forgot to put it on. I put it on my door. I'm sure your audience is like okay with me having children. They're like,
it's all right.
Children.
It's all good.
So anyways, I did that. So she was asking me if I drew that on purpose, and I was like, so what I was getting at is like a lot of my students are digital, first, right? Just like I was. Mm-hmm. And, they always ask me these kinds of questions, and I tell them is that, traditional painting has been around for thousands of years, and they had some of the hardest circumstances to work with. Mm-hmm. So they learned a lot of tricks and tips and techniques that are incredibly valuable today. You know what I mean? And if you learn them, they will only make your digital painting faster, right? Because, for instance, if you understand how to zoom out, like we talked about, or staying a step away, then you're completing a full image rather than specific parts of an image. It's like if you had a recipe to cook a pie, right? And you had 2 hours to prepare it, and you spent 1.5 hours just chopping up strawberries, perfectly. You still have to get all the other stuff ready so you can put it into the oven. You have no time now, right? It's like one of those like cooking shows. You see this happen to those chefs all the time. They always like over prepare one thing and then they have no time to prepare the whole thing. It's like, but that's a traditional technique. Chiaroscuro. I was like, that's a traditional technique. Painting with light and darks. That's my favorite way of painting. It's like, dude, these masters have been doing it for years. You know what I mean? Like, all I'm adding is the ability to like, I don't know, like liquefy, transform, make new layers, use layer adjustments, like stuff that is like crazy powerful.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't need any of them. I just use them to amplify or to iterate or to exaggerate an image. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. If I could show my screen, I could show you an example. Like, 'cause I have something painted right now, right? Actually, I could probably do this. Let me see if I can. Oh, whoops. Oh yeah, there you go. There's a little bit of. It's kind of pseudo. Okay. So
cool.
You can see that it's already kind of zoomed out, right? So here's a good example of like a Photoshop thing, right? Like if I wanted to take this and like scale it down and manipulate this, like, you know what I mean? Like that's what's cool about like digital, right?
Of course.
Then from here, I would go back to the traditional means of painting, right? Mm-hmm. Like adding the paint back onto it, right? Anyway, let me get back here.
Yeah. No, of course. Yeah.
So going back to this traditional point I'm making is that, like that's like the way that I got to the painting that you guys just saw was through traditional painting techniques, just on a digital medium. And then I always like tell them, like, let me ask you guys a question. Like, what's the fastest way to draw an ellipse, right? And like, especially like, digitally, I'll say, like, how do you do it digitally? And then people go, oh, you can get a marquee selection, or you can use this kind of tool. There's this plugin, they go off on all of these tools, right? I said, the fastest way to draw an ellipse is to just draw an ellipse, right? When you pull out all these things, like that's a step that you have to set up. Like, even if you have a tool that's like 1 or 2 seconds, like slower, that's still slower. You know what I mean? It's like, if you could just draw a perfect ellipse or a pretty good ellipse, then why use any tool, right? I was like, what's the fastest way to draw a straight line? Just draw a straight line. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that is a technique. That's not a tool. That's not a like a software plugin. That's just you drawing well. You know what I mean? And I said, if you put a lot of your ability into that, then when the tools get better and better, you will be able to transcend, meaning that, like, for instance, you mentioned Procreate, right? When I jumped into Procreate, I was just like, oh, cool. Now I got like a portable painting device. That's how I looked at it. I was like, tight.
Exactly. Yeah.
And all my friends were just like, oh, how do you get the brushes to work? Or how do you do this? Or how you, like, I can't do that. And they keep complaining about all of the things that they cannot do. Mm-hmm. And I had to remind them, I was like, well, that's because you have supplemented all of your skill within a specific tool. Now that you don't have that tool, that supplement is gone, right? That extension of your ability is gone. And I said, there's nothing wrong with that, but just be aware that's what's happening. Don't blame the tool, because I'm painting in this tool and it looks just as good as if I was painting in Photoshop. So clearly, there's a disconnect.
It's a crutch sometimes. That's the thing. Is like, I think that's the thing about digital painting. I'm obviously I'm a fan of digital painting. It's like how I make a living. But I feel like, I've always had like this, I guess, a personal philosophy for me that when it comes to digital painting is, I always welcome and want struggle, because that's my voice. Like, when you look at a traditional painting or drawing of mine, there's going to be flaws. There's going to be things that aren't 100% perfect. Yes. That's my fingerprint, and that's because my mind, my hand created that, and I want that same thing when I work digitally. And in order to do that, you have to make a conscious decision to not abuse the computer. And I'm not in agreement with people who think that digital art is not real art. That's a bunch of bullshit. Painting is painting. It doesn't matter what there's just different tools, different ways of creating a painting.
Absolutely.
And I've gotten shit. I'm sure you have before too. Like, oh, it's just digital, whatever. But it's changing now. Maybe me more than you, because I've been in the illustration world where I literally
gonna have more people that are more critical.
I went from where everyone was working traditionally and only getting into shows with traditional work to now most of the shows are digital work. So it's definitely evolved quite a bit. But I think that it's the mentality, I think, should just be that you're an artist and you're creating art. Is this, because I mean, it's the same exact content. Like I look at your paintings, and one of the things I really love. Oh.
They're like just showing me their pictures, and then I was just like, because they want to play video games, and I'm like, you guys can't play. I told you to stop interrupting me. They're like, oh.
One of the things I like about your paintings, though, is there's like it's really fun to watch you paint, because it's for one thing, it's a completely different like kind of art than what I typically do, obviously, but I like watching it evolve, because it'll just look like a mess of kind of just organic structure and lines and strokes, and then all of a sudden it just starts evolving and coming together, and I can see you developing and there's like a nice organic like feeling where it's like I love the mechanical and the organic mix that you do with your work a lot. It's pretty cool. And I was wondering, do you spend a lot of time basically observing and studying like human anatomy, but also just like mechanical objects? I mean, I imagine you must, in order to come up with these like robot shapes, because you do a lot of awesome like robot things. But the cool thing about it is, obviously, because you're an artist, you can just make it look like whatever you want. But but there's still like a structure, and there's a foundation there that I can see. So I'm just curious about how, like, what your practice is like, as far as like kind of how do you study and develop to do this kind of work, I guess. It's a long way to ask that question. But
how do you study?
How do you do so good? But you see what I'm saying, though? Like,
yeah.
Because, all those elements are within your work, and you're not just pulling it out of your ass, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and that's a great question. And you're right. You're a skilled artist, so you understand that it takes time and practice and studying. And I like this question because it allows me to answer it, to allow other people who may not know that this is just a thing. I will demonstrate why this is a thing. So to answer your question, like, how do I study? How do I practice? So I've been asked questions where people will say to me, or ask me, they'll say, like, what are you thinking about when you're drawing, like, whatever I'm drawing right in front of them? So for instance, I'm drawing this little robot guy, right? So people ask me, like, what are you thinking? Like, what's going through your mind? And I say to them, I'm not thinking about anything. I'm just painting.
Yeah.
And they're like floored by that answer, because they're assuming that there's like this like hierarchy of thoughts. Like there's like that meme where you see all the calculations like flying around.
Yeah.
Nothing like that, dude. I'm just, in fact, and I proved to them, because it's like, because this whole time, I was answering other questions and talking and all that stuff, and I was painting at the same time. So that would mean that I am just like some magician, right? That I can just do these multiple things. It's like, but no, I could prove to you that you are also the same way. That if you put a lot of time and effort to something, you'll just do it without even thinking. And I said, like, for most of the people that are listening, I would ask, can you walk? Like, do you know how to walk? And most people say, yes, of course I know how to walk, right? Most people. I don't want to speak for everyone. But you get what I'm saying? Like, if I ask anybody, like if I ask you, Jason, like, do you know how to walk? You go, yeah, of course, right? And it's like, have you ever walked and talked before? Like, do two things. Like, you're walking with, let's say, your wife, and you guys are just talking, right? And you say, yeah, of course, I've walked and talked. It's like, so when you're walking and talking, are you ever thinking about how you're walking? Are you thinking about, like, what are you thinking about when you're walking? And most people say, I don't think about anything. I just walk, right? I just go to where I wanted to go. And I said, that's how I am with painting. And what is a mystery, though, is that people look at art as some sort of God-given talent. People look at art as some sort of mystical nature, right? So like someone like you and I, people are like, oh, I wish I could be like you. I can't even draw a stick figure. This is like a common thing that people say.
Yeah.
And when people say that to me, I said, you can't draw what I draw is because you haven't practiced as much as me. It would be like going to the gym and somebody's like, hey, let's lift like 900 pounds, right? Whatever. It's like a ridiculous amount. You're like, are you crazy? You wouldn't say to them, it's like, oh man, I can't even, I don't even know what a weight looks like. I can't even pick up a 5-pound weight. Like, no, you'd be like, no, I can't pick up 900 pounds because that is too heavy, right? You would have the right assertion. You would have the right assumption, which is you can't lift heavy because you're not strong enough. So, but the strength, the idea of strength is a different perception, because when people think about strength, they think I can potentially get there if I train, right? But when you think about art, they say I can't get there even if I trained. And the reality is, no. You can get there if you train. In fact, and I'm going to get back to exactly what I do in terms of studying, but I just want to get the philosophy out first. This is really important. And so I say, what I try to do with people is remind them that as humans, being creative and artistic is actually built into us. We're naturally artistic. We are naturally creative creatures. This is something that is just given to us, actually, as a species. It's actually beaten out of us by our fellow humans, right? When you go to school, it's like you can't do art because there's no money there, right? It's the social economic reason why you shouldn't do art, because there's no money in it. But then when you look at people who don't realize this, what do? They watch movies, they play video games, they read books, they listen to music. The way that they feel happier in life is by engaging in what makes them human, right? Socializing, this is what's been really affecting people lately, right? Because they can't socialize as much. But like doing art, doing crafts, doing all that stuff. We did this stuff when we were kids. You have kids, I have kids, we know. Our kids love it, like just naturally like to do that kind of stuff, right? And so when you look at like the human escape, like we work in an industry where we are feeding people, we're supplementing their lack of fulfillment in their own creative endeavors. People who aren't artists like us, like I always encourage them, you should do something creative, like do crafts, do some, wood making or carpentry, like do something that actually feeds that in us as a human species. So, So going back to what I study and how I practice. So with this idea in mind, and with this kind of philosophy of thinking in mind, then it's pretty obvious how to get good at art. You should just practice the things you want to get good at. So if I'm a character designer, then I should know how to draw a character, right? Like if I wanted to be a sprinter, I'd have to know how to run, right? So what do? You train running. You train by sprinting. You can do other exercises like squats, leg presses to strengthen your legs. It's very focused. So if I am a character designer, what is my squats? Oh, well, anatomy, right? If I focus on anatomy, then if I have that as a second nature, I don't think about how a deltoid is inserted into like the bicep and how it's connected to the humerus and the clavicle and all that biomechanical functionality. If I don't have to like have that on the forefront of my mind, then when it comes to design, I just say, oh, this character needs an arm. I just draw an arm. You know what I mean? I don't think about how to draw an arm. I don't ponder the mysteries of human anatomy. I just draw one because I put like many, many years on learning how to draw one. Well, so it becomes like walking. You know what I mean? So then when I am walking, all I'm focused was what I'm talking about, right? When you walk, that's what you're actually focused on. You're focused on the conversation. You're not focused on the actual traversing through the environment, where I think like learning perspective, forms, anatomy, lighting, materials, that is the walking when it comes to becoming a designer. And then the design is the conversation, right? So when I'm looking at my image, the things that I actually try to think about, especially if I'm working, is like, what does the client want? Like, okay, they want a robot with like pirate theme. Okay, so I just think about pirate themes and just focus on that. But I don't worry about if I can paint. like a wooden leg. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh no, this character's got a wooden leg, and I'll just start putting it in there. You know what I mean? But that took many, many years, right?
Right.
Many, many years. I've been at this for, like, we've known each other for 10 years. So I've been at this for like 12, 13 years, easily, you know? And you've been doing it since you were like a kid, right? You've told me great stories about your father teaching you how, or like you just having your father around as like an example of like quality. That plays into people's ability to get better, right? And people, whenever they see someone that's extraordinarily good, it's just a natural reaction to just put it onto some sort of magical element like talent, right? Because to face the reality would be you just haven't trained nearly as much and you're highly unskilled. That's what it really means. That's all that it actually means.
For sure. Yeah.
And people have a hard time facing that. But I'm telling anybody that's listening, that is the secret weapon. And you said it earlier, like you accept challenges, you accept flaws, you accept struggle. That is actually the secret weapon for what I found in most amazing artistic individuals that I've ever met in my whole career. That is kind of like the common denominator that we all have, that I've seen, is that most, if not all of them, are okay with not being good. And what I mean by this is like they can face the facts that they suck and it's okay. And I think a lot of times people don't want to admit that they suck. They want to just feel like, well, it's something else is going on. Oh, I'm just not using the right brush. I'm not using the right tool. I'm not, like, there's something else, versus just looking at themselves and acknowledging I'm not good. Because once you do that, then you say, well, now how do I get good? Right? Like, okay, my anatomy is trash. You know, AJ said it's trash. Okay, I need to start studying. And I always ask my students this question is like, how many times have you studied anatomy this week? Like how many hours? You know, and sometimes it'd be like 2 or 3 hours. It's like, see, so this is my point, you know? When I was really learning it, I was spending 4 or 5 hours every day for like a whole year. You know what I mean? And it would be weird if I didn't understand anatomy after doing that. It would be actually strange that if you put like real effort, real like, you know, stress and anxiety inducing effort, right? For years, that you're still terrible, right? And you have to be honest with yourself. Like, have you genuinely practiced? Have you genuinely studied? Have you actually put in that mileage? You know, you can tell everybody else that you have, but unfortunately for us artists, people can see that you're lying. You know, they can look at your work and know that you're lying. So I find value in learning how not to do things. You know what I mean? Absolutely.
I think that's one of the best things. You know, like it's interesting. Like even like in demos that I've done, or the current one that I'm working on right now, I'll leave in mistakes while I'm working on it, not edit that out of the video. You know, like I'm working on one where I realized, oh, the way I did actually draw an arm was not as good as it could have been, and I spent a ton of time rendering it, and I just painted over it and started over, and I'm leaving it in there because, you know, I think it's good to see that. It's good to see that, hey, wait, you know, you have to make, you know, I just finished watching The Last Dance about the Bulls and Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
And it's so inspiring and encouraging, even though I'm not super into sports. I was always a huge Jordan and Bulls fan. Sure. And it's cool to see that again, and to kind of watch just how much of what he did was not just about being a physical, you know, god basically, and a master of the sport,
Sure.
but how much of it was mental and emotional strength and power. You know, it's pretty encouraging to see that, and you know, and I think that's what it takes. You know, a lot of I'm sure you get this all the time too, is like a lot of people ask, like, you know, or say, you know, I wish I could do what you do. I wish I could, you know, make a living being an illustrator or doing this kind of a thing. But it's not fun all the time. It's not like your mind is ever free from making, I don't know if I'm even making sense. Basically, what I'm trying to say is,
I know exactly what you're saying.
Like, in my mind, it never stops. Like I never can turn off. Like even right now, the entire time that I'm looking at you while we're talking, all I'm thinking about is shapes and color and form, and I'm noticing little things about your mouth and your eyes and different things. I can't turn that off, and sometimes it's frustrating. You know what I mean? But it's one of those things is when you kind of commit yourself, you make that commitment that this is what I am going to do. You got to go deep or go home, I think. So I think it's funny. Like, when I asked you about the anatomy thing, I mean, obviously I know that you study anatomy, but what's interesting, I guess what I'm more curious about is just the like you do anatomy, but you're creating. What's fun about it is you're creating more. Like you're not just doing like a 6-pack on someone, like you'll do like a 24-pack or whatever. You'll add like all different kinds of, organic material and, mechanical things. And the mechanical things are more what I find interesting to me. Cause, like for me, I would have to gather up a bunch of references, in order to, I could probably make some shit up, but
it would be a challenge for sure.
Yeah,
right?
I prefer to like get as much references as like right now I'm doing a kind of a silly little advertisement thing where I have to draw this guy on a horse. I don't draw horses I'm not a.
I think I accidentally pressed a hotkey in Skype that disconnects me.
Okay.
Sorry about that, guys.
No, it's no worries. So what I was saying is like I'm not like an expert or a master on horses or painting horses or whatever, but once you start studying like human anatomy or whatever, you start to pick up on why does the jawbone on the horse look this way or whatever. You start to like notice even the anatomy and things that you're not 100% familiar with because you're used to lighting, you're used to there's a familiarity enough with anatomy that you can see that kind of a thing. But I still have to get as many references of horses as possible, right? Because I got to make it look like a horse, like a real horse. But I think one thing that I think is freeing in a lot of your concept designs is you're making up things. So there's like that freedom where you can kind of just almost just do whatever you want. I mean, I'm kind of stuck more in, even though I do caricature illustration and portrait illustration stuff, I'm kind of stuck in a reality world a little bit, where I can't just draw an arm and a hand and make it look weird. I have to make it look, human. But
let me speak to that actually. No, I get what you're saying. So this is like part of a different question. So you were asking me earlier, like, how do I go about studying and all that stuff? So I answered it, on a philosophical level, talking about how it's like exercise and all this good stuff, right? And then I gave the answer of like, I study anatomy, right? And so now the follow-up to this question, if I'm hearing right, is like, okay, so now how do you take that information and then apply it to, let's say, designing, right? And so, like, how do you practice being able to design freely, like come up with stuff out of nowhere? And it goes back to the kind of the earlier philosophy that I mentioned. It's not coming out of nowhere, right? It's that I studied very specifically a certain set of like images and imagery to just kind of be in my head at all times, right?
Right.
And I learned enough of the fundamentals of those shapes and designs that it just is enough to kind of design a lot of the kind of stuff that I designed, moving forward, like robots, monsters, characters, right? So kind of give you an example of what I cannot do. If you were to ask me to draw a horse, right? Like a very realistic horse, like you just said, I would have the same strategy as you, gathering lots of reference, gathering lots of images, and basically using that as a middle ground, because I have very little experience painting and drawing horses or even designing them. You know what I mean? And so the way that I think about this is that if you don't know it, you can't paint it, right? So if I don't know what a horse looks like or how to draw a horse, I'm just not going to be able to do it. No matter how cool I can draw a robot, that's not a horse. And I like to try to use a good example of like, It's like you can have two people on the same team playing the same sport, but they're two different skills. For instance, you can have a goalie versus a forward, right? So let's say we're all on the same team. We're on the USA soccer team, and you're the forward and I'm the goalie, okay? I'm really good at blocking shots. You're really good at making the shots, right? We're on the same team. We're playing against a different team. We're even in the same game. If the coach just said, hey, Jason and AJ, just switch roles. Let's just switch it up. You know, AJ, you're now the goal or forward, and then Jason, you're now the goalie, right? That game would probably end poorly. It's not to say that you wouldn't be a good goalie, and it's not to say that I wouldn't be a good forward, but we are experts at that very specific skill.
Exactly.
And just to switch it up, just because we are still playing the same sport, we're still kind of playing the same game, you know what I mean? Doesn't mean you can just switch roles that easily, right? So if you were, so to kind of be more tangible, if you were to ask me to do caricature design, like caricature illustration, that would be just as challenging for me as it would be for you to kind of do robot designs that I would.
Oh, yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Well, of course.
And so the way that you got really good at caricature design is the same way you would need to get good at robotic designs. So you were talking about how you're looking at me and you're seeing all the shapes of like my nose, my facial expressions. You're already thinking about how you would turn me into a caricature, you know, a really good illustration. I, on the other hand, let me look at what you got over here in your room. Okay, so I would look at like the design layout of your entire studio, right? Like why your easel is set up the way that it's set up to you, it looks like to your stage right, my left, right? I'm looking at that easel and thinking mechanically, why does that work? Like, why does that easel work the way that it does? And why would Jason use it? Because that's designing, right? Because let's say I'm going to design a painter, right? Then knowing like why and how that kind of stuff works and why you decided to do that will allow me to design a painter character. You know what I mean? And if I'm saying, okay, I'm going to design a painter that is supposed to be like a fighter, like in a video game, right? So, okay, maybe he can use an easel as like a rocket launcher and he like, he paints bombs on it and then loads up the easel and shoots out like paintings that are images of the weapons that he wants to use. See, something like that is my skill. You know what I mean? And again, like people will hear that and think, well, how did he come up with that idea? It's a skill. I trained to think this way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think in a way where I'm thinking of what is cool, like what a 12-year-old version of me would think is cool, like what the audience that I'm making think this thing would be cool. You know, like I think in that way. A good example of this is the Twilight franchise. Like, do you know about the Twilight franchise? Like the vampires that love like one character. Okay, so anyway, so I saw that movie with my wife. We both hated it, right? We didn't like it at all. But that's my opinion. I don't like the Twilight franchise. But as a designer, I have to ask myself, why is that franchise successful though? Because there's no doubt it was a hit, right? And so why though? And there's great examples of why it was a hit. So for instance, there was a scene in the first movie that I thought was super, super goofy, where Edward, the main vampire, like crush, he is like out in the forest with Bella. I think that's her name. I forget. But he's like, I'm going to show you my secret. And he's like about to walk out into the sun. And I'm just like, oh, here we go. He's going to like start smoking or something, right? He's going to be, because he's a vampire. And he walks out into the sun. He's like glittery. He's like shining. He's like bedazzled. And I was like, what? And then I remember thinking, like,
God damn it.
His weakness is that he's embarrassed.
Yeah.
You know, that he's embarrassed. That
he sparkles.
Like,
that's his
that he sparkles.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that he's actually in danger. You know what I mean? And what made me think about that is like, well, okay, imagine that you're a teenage girl, right? And you're just kind of growing into becoming a woman. Like, what is your dream guy? Like a guy that drools over you. He's made out of, you know, your favorite type of jewelry potentially, right? Like literally, he is a diamond.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh yeah. And just to kind of find the male equivalent of this, it's like, you know, like movies like Transformers, where you would have Megan Fox, like all of a sudden be really into cars, and she's a super hot supermodel, like opening up the hood of a car, you know? And it's like that's pandering to that in the same direction for teenage boys. You know what I mean? You know, and that's how a designer should think. It's like, why do people like this thing, right? Because if you're going to design something for, like, let's say Sesame Street, obviously I'm not going to draw my demented monsters because it just doesn't fit, right? Yeah. It doesn't mean that my designs are bad. It just means it doesn't fit. And vice versa. I wouldn't want to put, like, Elmo living in my hellscapes, you know, just running around.
That'd be pretty cool, though.
Unless that's what I'm going for, right? Unless I'm, like, trying to have a satire. It's a comedy, potentially, and it's kind of making fun of that, right? There is a place for everything. It's just, that's why I like to think of it like design as, there's no such thing as bad design, just misplaced design, right? And when you misplace designs, if they don't belong where they're supposed to belong, then it feels bad, right? But you can, like, to your point, you can have something that is intentionally bad that actually works. Like I think there's, like, that one comedian, like, he has the Andre show, and it's like really, it's like deliberately bad, but because it's deliberately bad, it's hilarious, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, it's really cringy and awkward, but it's, like, entertaining as hell, you know? Most reality shows, right, are like this. And so, but that's how I think, right? And how do I train that? Well, I look at the world in that lens. I look at everything. Like, I look at why people watch movies the way they do. I'll look at why people buy shoes, clothes, buy toys. Like, why did people buy these things? What is it about this car that's better about this car? Like, when I look at this car, like a Bugatti, like, why does a Bugatti look like it's $1 million versus, like, you know, a Civic? You know what I mean? Like, there is something there. You know what I mean? Like, you may know nothing about design, but when you see, like, a Rolex watch, like a specific brand of, like, really expensive watches, you know that it's expensive by just looking at it, right? Versus, like, a watch you can get at Target. There's something to that, you know? Like, where you don't have to know anything about design, but yet you know good design when you see it, right? And that is a skill that can totally be trained. You know what I mean? And it's a hard skill, just like learning anatomy or any of these other things. And in fact, I think it's even harder to learn because there's not a lot of education on how to learn it, you know? Yeah. And so that's probably the biggest reason why it's harder to learn. It's not because it's, like, actually harder. It's because it's less resources. You know?
For sure. And I feel, too, to add on to that, I feel like another thing that I feel a lot of artists struggle with that I see all the time is values, understanding values. And that's one thing that I've always enjoyed about your work as well, is because you have it's one thing to be able to design things and create cool looking characters and so on. But what makes your work very appealing is you, because of your understanding of values, you're able to really capture the sense of light and weight, and also really, really good with, for being someone who hasn't really painted traditionally, you've got a really strong understanding of soft edges, and as I said, the values, which I think is really interesting. And so when it comes to values, it seems like something that you focus a lot on. Like, it seems like you spend a lot of time with it. I notice you do a lot of kind of grayscale type images, which, it's funny. I do a lot. Most of my studying, my personal stuff that I do on my own, it's usually always black and white painting. And people are always like, why do you always do these black and white sketches? It's because it's like going to the gym. It's like, I'm trying, the more I can master values, the more my paintings in color are going to be better. You know what I mean? It's going to make more sense. But that's something that I really enjoyed about your work is you, there's a few pieces where you'll actually kind of, a couple of pieces I really like of yours where you'll kind of tip the scale in a way, value-wise, where you won't get completely dark or you won't get completely white. You'll kind of stay in this, like, mid-tone. I love that kind of stuff. It reminds me of some of Phil Hale's paintings. You know Phil Hale, right?
Yeah.
I just like that kind of mid-tone value range. I've tried to get away with that a little bit in some paintings at times, but some art directors think it's a little too artsy, if you know what I'm talking about. Why can't you just do one of those realistic paintings? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's all about the values, my dude. I'm with you on that. Yeah, I think values is one of those fundamental things. Now, remember, this is something that I would say is specifically to, like, if you want to paint something that has some believability, you want to have good values. If you get rid of color, we would still be able to navigate the world pretty effectively, right? Like if you were colorblind, like in an absolute way. But if you are, like, let's say we got rid of the values and you only saw the world in only hue, that would be really challenging to navigate through, right? People will be really disoriented. And so, but the point I'm trying to make here is that when you look at just the colors of an image and you complement the colors of an image, most of the time people don't realize this, but you're also complementing the actual values, right?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
The values is what holds it together. The color just amplifies it. You know what I mean? And I've done this plenty of times where I would take a really beautiful color painting that people like, and I would change all the colors and say, look, it still works. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Frazetta was really good about this, where he would focus all of his attention on values, but he would just use like hot colors for shadows, right? But the value was accurate, right? He would like get like I don't know, like a darker cadmium red or something, and just put it in there, like as like the underbelly lighting, so it looks like really strong, bright, like red bounce light. But it was a darker shade than like the really light value on like the upper chest that makes it like look like it's illuminating. And that plane shift is super strong and really effective, that the image just feels great. But then because he used just a stark, like saturated color, people immediately attach themselves to that real fast and first, right? They don't look at the values as the main reason why that works. Because I could take a painting like that and just change it from a red shadow to like a blue shadow, and it'll look just as good. But now you're feeling differently about it, not in terms of does it feel like a good painting. You feel different about like, oh, now he feels like he's in a cooler environment. It actually changes your perception of where he is, not whether the painting has now just completely fell apart, right?
Right.
It goes from a fire den to a cold cavern. That's what happens. That's what color helps you with. Color helps tell a story. You know what I mean? It doesn't necessarily help you tell forms. It doesn't necessarily help you tell structure, design. It doesn't really help you with that kind of stuff. Color is more on the story element and just visceral reaction, right? Which is why I think people have that visceral reaction in the first place, right? They see color and it speaks to them real quick. You know what I mean? And people who are really good at color know this. They know values is one of the most important features, and then they can play with saturation and hue in really intelligent ways to make their image, like they can have like an off shade gray red, like a grayish red, but it looks super red because they put it right next to like a nice blue that's super saturated, right? Like they understand this, on top of like having that strong understanding of values. And so, oh yeah, I actually need to tell you too, I only have like 15 minutes left.
Oh, that's fine. No problem.
Yeah. Sorry, I forgot to mention that I don't have.
No, that's cool. I got a couple fan art to show you too as well before we go. But
oh, cool. I want to see it.
But yeah, no, I totally 100%. You're speaking my language. Yeah, for me, painting, I have to paint in color all the time. But the thing is it's funny. I get asked all the time, like, oh, or people say, you know, look how realistic this is, and oh my gosh, it looks so amazing. Look at the colors and everything. But really, the truth is just like what you're saying. It's I'm mostly focusing on the values, yes. And when I'm painting, I'm not trying to copy exactly what I'm seeing in a photo reference. I'm thinking more about the temperature more than the exact color. So yeah, I have freedom. Absolutely. I have a freedom when I'm working. And same thing with oils and everything else. I'm mostly like, is the value spot on? Because that's the most important thing for me. That's what makes the form come alive and pop out. And then it's all about the mood, you know, the aesthetic and the mood that you're going for. Like how bright do you want it, or warm or cool or desaturated or whatever it is.
Absolutely.
But anyways, Hey, man, I know you got to go soon. It's been an hour, but this has been a fun talk, man. It's been fun just talking art shit with you because,
We
like I
should do
said,
it again.
yeah, we'll definitely do it again, man. It's been, it's been a long time since we've gotten to hang out or anything, but I always enjoy seeing your work and seeing what you've been working on and everything. But before we skedaddle, I want to show you real quick. There was a few people that did fan art here.
Yeah, and I'm going to send you this image too, by the way, that I painted so people can look at what I painted during our talk.
Oh, yeah, that would be awesome.
Later.
Yeah. So let me share my screen here. Tell me if you see this.
I do not see nothing.
Do you see this?
Mm-hmm. Hey, that looks like a me.
This is by Hossein Rezapour, and
I like it.
This is actually a traditional drawing. This was done with a Wacom pencil. No, dude, no joke.
Cool.
I was at a convention a few years back, and I was doing an acrylic painting at my table. And someone asked me if it was digital, but I was literally painting it right there. And they asked me if I was working digitally.
Is that a digital medium of acrylic that just came out?
Yeah.
Maybe they were just nervous, dude. They just like, oh, this guy's amazing.
I mean, literally, I actually had my reference and my painting upside down, so when people walked by, they could see it the right, they could see it the right way. And I was like literally mixing my acrylics and painting. Like, is that a digital painting? No.
So funny.
Here we go. I don't know what's happening.
Oh no, this is awesome. This is no, I did a painting of Toad a long time ago.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's what.
And it looks like it's a fan art. It's like a combination of a painting that I did a long time ago and myself. This is awesome. This is gnarly.
This is by Jacques Lemonnier.
Oh, thank you, man. This is like some OG fan art too, because that painting that I did, it was like years ago, like even before I met you.
That's awesome.
So this person's like hardcore, knows about me. Well, thank you, man. I appreciate it.
And I think there's only one more actually. Let's see. And oh yeah, here
that,
goes.
That or it could be a huge coincidence that I did that. I doubt it though. Anyway. Oh, look at this. This is super cool.
This is by Dominic Zeilinger. It's pretty funny.
Yeah. I'm not sure why I'm Mickey Mouse. That part I don't know. The other one I knew exactly where the reference was coming from. This one I do not. I mean, I'm down. I like it. I mean, I kind of look like it right now with my headphones, right? Sorta.
Yeah, maybe those are. Yeah, I don't know.
Foresight. No, because I got whiskers too. At first, I thought maybe it was like graphic design, but no, he put whiskers on me too. So I'm definitely a mouse. Unless he forgot to erase his life. I would love to know why you did that.
Yeah.
Oh, you want to share the image that I painted? It's in.
Oh yeah. Where did you? You know what? I'll share it. I'll share it on the screen when I edit it together. It'll be way easier that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks everybody for sending those drawings. It's fun. And yeah, Dominic, let us know why the mouse thing, because that's pretty funny. But
I'm not judging. I'm completely confused. It's cool though. I like the image actually in its totality. I just want to know why.
Hey, one last thing before we go. I just wanted to ask you, like, how have you been lately with all that's been going on and everything?
Sure.
Personal life and everything else. Have everything been going well with all this? And
that's so funny. Like, we only have like
how
is all of your life?
How is everything going?
Well, I mean, as good as it can be, right? So obviously, the world is experiencing one of the craziest situations ever, right? In terms of like the pandemic, and not everybody is handling it all too well. And I mean that in the most sensitive way. A lot of people either aren't taking it serious, or other people are taking it super serious, and then other people are like in between. Mm-hmm. And then there's people who are just not feeling, they feel like all the world that they knew is gone, and they're having a little bit of existential crisis on their hands. And I'm sensitive to all of this. I think this is reasonable, like a lot of people's reactions. I don't agree with a lot of it, but I understand why people are kind of going through it. So speaking to that, like, what is my personal experience on this? I have always had a feeling of just better safe than sorry, right? There may be a lot of, information that comes out that reveals a lot of truth about what we could have done and should have done, what it could have, should have. But the reality is, my wife she's asthmatic, so she's the kind of individual, if she gets it, it could be really bad,
Right.
And so I'm taking it pretty seriously. But it's funny because as an artist, I'm already used to just staying at home.
Exactly.
So I'm not like too this doesn't affect me nearly as dramatically as like a lot of other people, I'm used to interacting with people on the internet,
Yeah, same here.
So the only thing that was different, that was a kind of a challenge, was that the school pulled the rug got pulled underneath the school system. And so then our kids were now like not going to school, which again wasn't a big deal, that specifically. It was that they had to still do schoolwork. And now my wife and I had to become like kindergarten and second grade teachers, like overnight.
Yeah. Yep.
The whole structure was like chaos. So that one tipped me over a little bit. I was like, oof, this one's rough. But that was, once we got over that, then everything was back to kind of, we were
and just to be clear, I mean, what I actually meant was just like, how you doing, man? You doing okay?
Oh yeah, I'm getting into that.
That's okay.
Yeah, sorry, you're right. I'm getting like way too sensitive.
No, it's okay.
So what I'm trying to get at is like, overall, with that considered, I've been doing okay. I've been doing great. Yeah. I was working for a studio, and this is like, it's all compounded, man. The studio just shut down like a week ago. So I'm in a situation where, again, I've been working from home and freelancing and teaching for like 5 years. So I'm not too worried, but it's just like, man, 2020, dude, it just keeps throwing me curveballs. It does not give up, man. It's just like, it's not letting up, dude. Keeps throwing like, hooks and stuff. I'm just like, what the heck is going on here, right? And so, like, with all things considered, with all the stuff that's been happening, I've been pretty optimistic and pretty, like I always look at stuff like this as an opportunity to learn, right? Like to be challenged. There are some things that I found that caught me off guard, that I wasn't prepared for, and it made me really reevaluate my own stance in the world, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But I've had those moments before, if that makes sense too. Like it's not like nothing is so bad where it's like, oh man, I'm really struggling. I'm actually very blessed, very lucky that the career path that I've picked, the journey that I've decided to go on, is a journey in a career that is mostly unaffected by what's been going on in the global arena, right?
Right.
Where I know some friends who are not in that situation. So I've been trying to be helpful to that as much as possible. So that's kind of where I've been. I've been really staying positive, and also just trying to be helpful to those who need the help, right? And I feel like that's the best I can be, like I said, with all things being considered, I feel pretty good, generally speaking. And with that being said, how about yourself? How you been feeling?
Hey,
back at you, dude.
Yeah, no, I'm doing pretty good, man. Just like I said, we just had a baby, so it's same thing, like same situation. Like things have been pretty slow, art wise, but I'm trying to keep myself busy and working on projects, and trying to be positive. The main thing I think is important is when you have kids. Like I have 4 daughters. And my 17-year-old, 13-year-old, 2-year-old, or almost 3-year-old now, and then 4 weeks old. So I just trying to like be positive about as much as possible, and not take on all the worries and stress and different things so they don't have to feel it. That's the way that I try to go about it. But It is a crazy time, man. It's really weird, but I'm glad to hear that you're doing well and stuff. And again, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me, man.
Yeah, my advice to stay more positive is to stay like offline as much as possible.
Yeah. I've had to make that choice myself as well. Like just don't even bother getting into that crap, and But
it's hard, man.
It's tempting. But hey, before we go, is there anything you want to direct people towards? I know you're doing something for Lightbox as well, right?
I am. Actually,
that's
going to
coming
probably
up.
do something today and tomorrow. And then also, if you just go to my website, which is robotpencil.net, usually I have tutorials and courses that I teach online. I generally do that. And if you follow me on my Instagram at robotpencil, you can see my latest grades. Lately, I've actually been in the study mode. I've been practicing a lot. Mostly 3D softwares. And so I haven't been posting. I usually post like every day, but like for the last few months, I've just been learning.
Yeah.
But I do feel that I should get back to like posting and painting again. Not only because it's good practice, but just because people like it. People like to see cool stuff. And I think it might be a time for people to see that again.
For sure.
But that's pretty much it. I mean, I just teach online and I paint a lot.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, thanks again, man. I really appreciate it. And again, thank you everybody for listening and supporting the podcast. This is, it's a lot of fun getting to talk to awesome guys like this. And we'll catch you all next week. Be safe. And let's see. Let me think of something really cool to say here.
It better be good, man.
Yeah. We'll see y'all later. How about that? We'll see you later.
See you guys later.
All right. See you, man.
All right. Cheers.
You want answers? Find the truth shall set you free. I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.